What's up, guys? This is Pete, aka Characters. Welcome back to the Carrot Poker Podcast. It's been a couple of weeks, and a lot of you may have been wondering what the hell happened to the Carrot Poker Podcast, because it was a good sort of 14-15 days after the episode that this one has actually come out. And the reason for that, as you may have expected, is that I kind of locked myself away in a kind of man cave and tried to finish the book, and I succeeded. So I'm very pleased to announce today that the Grinder's Manual, the all-inclusive Bible, as I see it, to No Limit Hold'em 6 Max Cash Games Online, is now available. And YouTube viewers, you can see there on your screen that you can head over to my website, carrotcorner.com/mybook, or click the My Book section of my website from the headers at the top, and there is a sample extract on there, as well as a link with which you can purchase the book. So this is a book launch special episode, and today what I'm going to do is basically go through the entire kind of syllabus of the Grinder's Manual. This is a 540-page absolute mammoth textbook. There is so much poker meat in this book. There's a reason it took me way longer than expected, well, real life getting in the way to get this finished, but also just the sheer enormity, I guess, of the project. I didn't anticipate that the book was going to be quite this big, but I just didn't feel I could do this game justice by writing a 250-page, 300-page book, as would have been a bit more conventional and standard. So what I'm going to do today is go through the 14 poker kind of chapters that are available in the book, and basically you'll see right now, YouTube viewers, sorry for anyone listening to this, as most people will be as a podcast, MP3 file or whatever, it won't make a big difference. I'll be talking through exactly what is in this book, giving you a general, broad, sweeping overview. There won't be any more going through and doing little sections, because I've done that to death. I've done 9 or 10 of those in previous podcasts, so I'm going to focus this episode on actually going through the table of contents, which spans the whole 540 pages. The table is interactive, as you can see here on YouTube, and what I'm doing for those of you not watching is I'm clicking one of the sections. So it's like the introduction is section 1, then I've got sections 2 to 14 on technical topics. So if I click, for example, section 6.1, which is entitled The Reasons to Call and Open, we can jump straight to that page, and you can see that is the start of 6.1, Reasons to Call and Open Pre-Flop. So it's a textbook that I'd recommend reading like any academic text, basically from start to finish, and taking notes and just being very careful and going through it multiple times. But also it's a reference textbook, and that's why the table of contents is, I made sure it was interactive on this PDF. You can click on any part of it to jump straight to that section if you would like a recap on the certain situation. If a hand comes up, for example, that fits where you're wondering about your c-bet sizing, you can scroll down to 4.2 in the table of contents, page 114, and look at c-bet sizing. You can click it, and we can jump straight to that page, and you can get all the information about that, hand examples, etc. As you can see on YouTube right here, there are a lot of figures in this book. It's laid out very professionally, very cleanly. I took a lot of time to make sure that these figures looked good. There are a lot of figures in the book, something like 80 of them, I think, and a lot of hands, or 152 hand examples in this book, something like 80 figures, and lots of definition boxes for all the poker jargon. Not just poker jargon in a general sense, but also jargon in the sense that I use some terms slightly unconventionally sometimes to differentiate them clearly from other terms, and to try and actually describe them a bit more accurately than they perhaps sometimes are in the poker community. So as you can see on YouTube right now, and for those listeners, what I'm doing is I'm going down to the Jargon Handbook, page 533 at the very end of the manual. If I click there, you can see a definition of every single term alphabetically that you came across in this book. So basically, yeah, that's it. I've got a more about the author page as well for anyone that wants to investigate coaching on my website, obviously, just for a little bit of advertising at the end. So that was my picture popping up there for anyone on YouTube. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking about what's popping up on screen, because that's going to be pretty annoying for those of you listening, and I'm just going to basically talk to you about the sections in the book, leaving the table of contents on screen as I go for anyone watching on YouTube. If, by the way, you're in the house and would rather see this book for yourself, there's 2 things you can do. One is you can actually go onto YouTube and watch this podcast by searching for the Carrot Poker Podcast on YouTube to see exactly what I'm talking about here, but I will describe it to you like I say, so it's not totally essential. The second thing you can do is go to carrotcorner.com/mybook and actually read the sample extract, which is about 20-30 pages long of the 530 in the book, and is found at the bottom of the My Books section of my website. And there are various links that you can click to purchase the book from there. Anyway, so let's go through what this syllabus actually is. This is basically my coaching syllabus that I've devised by privately coaching people, running a poker learning community, and just working with aspiring players one-on-one with good results for the last 5 years. I've basically tried to take everything that I think is completely essential for a complete game, good enough for you to work your way through to, I would say, 100 NL online these days on PokerStars easily, if you can apply this information properly and use it well. This book will even teach better players things than that. People already beating 100 NL online or 200 NL online. I teach people playing things like 510 Live as well. Professional poker players, they are also buying this book. They will get a lot out of it. This book is for anybody, really, apart from perhaps the best online poker player in the world that already knows this inside out. So, yeah, let me go through what I think this essential syllabus is. By the way, I've also tried to make sure I've not included any extra detail than is completely essential. The 152 hands in this book, as I say in the introduction, are a bare minimum. They're the least amount of hands I thought I could get away with putting in the book. Basically, I thought that any less wouldn't do it justice. Any more would perhaps start to verge on it would become a ridiculous kind of catalogue, kind of Bible, rather than something that you can actually read through start to finish. So I wanted to kind of keep it under, 600-700 pages, because that's just getting like kind of obscene after that. So I hope I've done a good enough job of editing it down. I think I have. I don't think I've cut out anything essential. I think I've left everything that should be in your complete toolkit to work your way through to establish the skills that you need to succeed at 100, 200 NL on the toughest games online right now. Now, that's not me saying that if you buy this book and read it that you're guaranteed success at those stakes. What I'm saying to you is that you have the toolkit of the technical game of poker. This is a technical manual. It's very much about strategic elements of poker, understanding the nuts and bolts of what makes things high EV, low EV, what makes strategies in the long term good or bad, and all the different myriad of situations you can get into in a no limit hold'em 6 max cash game online. The HUD is covered in detail throughout. There are green stat boxes for every HUD stat you can imagine, and those will tell you both the relevance of the sample size for that stat, like how many hands it becomes relevant at, and how you interpret it exactly with sort of stat ranges, giving you a loose description of what you can infer about a player type when you read through those. There are definition boxes in purple, and those are basically just to give you a flavour, or to give you a initial definition of what something means before we've got what a term means, give you the flavour of that term before we go into detail and actually talk about a lot of stuff to do with that term below. And that's kind of how it works. There are other boxes as well, like orange boxes, which are generally rules in the manual. For example, you can take an orange box, for example, that when factors and stealing factors are neutral, hero needs 5 to 10% less fold equity than the initial calculation will tell him. That's due to the fact that hero can realise equity on the flop, and will not be just playing completely fit or fold and folding like every flop when he gets called with his steal. So that's just an example of the kind of thing that is in an orange box. There are a lot of things in an orange box in this manual. Also, anything like a figure, you can always, if it's ever referred to, you can always click a link to go straight to it and see what those figures are. There's a lot of factor tables in the manual. A lot of the figures are, some of them are like hand ranges, some of them are like graphics, graphs, charts, kind of visual descriptions of concepts, but a lot of them are actually tables of factors. Like in this spot, these are the things that make raising good, these are the things that make it bad. These are trying to teach you guys what things are relevant first, so that you can then hone in on those and assess them properly. Good poker logic is all about first identifying the factors that are relevant, and secondly, being able to assess those quickly and accurately in the limited amount of time available in-game. And the secret to that is practicing memorization of what's relevant, and the kind of bridging of the gap between your out-of-game, you've got all day to think about it environment, and the in-game on the tables, you've got 8 seconds to act environment. Very different. So let's get into this now. I'm just going to go through every chapter very briefly here. I'm not going to be going into any detail. I'm just going to be describing to you the logical order of the manual, why it's been chosen as such, and I'm not going to be clicking every single chapter on YouTube either. I'm just going to be going through this table of content, so you'll have to peek inside on my website if you want to see a continuous stream of pages in order. Okay, so in my introduction, which is section 1 of 14, I first talk about what the manual is about, like how you should read it, who it's for, and to elaborate on that, it's for, honestly, a beginning player who will start off with the right foundation from chapter 2, which is on opening the pot, and also from chapter 1, which also goes through things like EV, the model of teaching in this book, and also the other 2 aspects of poker success, briefly, that are outside of the technical game of poker, and those are the mental game, i.e. tilt control, and just your mental approach, and then what I call the practical game of poker, which is very much about your professional attitude to the game, your habits, your study habits, how you approach it. But anyone, as long as you know like what a raise is, that you understand like that a flush beats a straight, that you understand that some basic poker ideas, for example, that you bet, you put money into the pot when you think your hand is better than your opponent's to try to win money from him, even leaving terms like value betting aside, if you understand like these kind of very initial truths about poker, then this book is definitely for you. We start off pretty gently, but I've tried to, and I think I've successfully created a book that from the beginning teaches everybody. It's not just that it starts off and says a flush beats a straight, these are the chips and this is the button, and it's not like that. It's like, this is the six max table, here's under the gun, here are a bunch of factors about starting hands that you've probably never seen before, ways of looking at starting hands that build a complete constructive understanding from the beginning in chapter 2. So I'm kind of jumping about a bit here. I'll just go through this logically and in order. Chapter 1, we talk about the manual, and I basically stipulate that. 1.2, I talk about EV, the currency of poker, and why EV is the absolute everything of this manual, why it's the holy grail, why it's what we will refer to in terms of making something good or bad time and time again. Then I talk about the bottom-up learning model, which is the way this manual is taught. It's taught from the beginning upwards. So I want to build a structure, a pyramid of solid foundational knowledge about poker in your head. I don't want to jump to the middle of the pyramid when I've not set the foundations. You do that with a house, it crumbles. It's the same with poker. Foundational learning is the best way to get your head around this game, and that's why this book, or this textbook, has been set up in a very academic way like that. It's a complete course. It's not just, you know, for beginners, for intermediates, or for advanced players. It's something that starts off with factors that probably most competent players will be quite comfortable with, but will still be learning more. And as it progresses, it moves quickly into the realms of, well, you better now be a pretty intermediate player to be understanding what I'm talking about. So slow progress and working through is the way. It's also laid out in the sense that the first chapters are the most foundational, so that you can beat 5NL by understanding the first few chapters, opening the pot, when someone limps, c-betting, value betting, and calling opens. You can have a good grasp of what's really important to beat the lowest games online by understanding that kind of stuff. Don't worry if you don't understand everything the first time you read through this book. You probably won't. You'll need to go back and reread a lot of sections. So chapter 2 is opening the pot. I start off just by talking about the six-handed table and introducing like the differences between the positions, basically, which is fairly basic. Then I go into rating starting hands, which is something that I've got a very unique take on. I don't just, you know, talk about, well, aces is the big pocket pair, it likes to flop and overpair. I actually grade them in 3 different attributes, as you'll learn when you get to that section, and I actually give them scores and talk about why I've chosen these scores and the priorities of these scores for the specific format of the game, i.e. no limit hold'em 6 max cash online. Then I move through the positions 2.3 to 2.7, cover under the gun, through to the small blind, and we design default ranges. We talk about ways that we would change and alter those ranges based on the players at our table, basically, and stack sizes and things like that. And then we do a little bit of math about stealing, and we just get to the foundational core of what steal actually is, how the math affects it in reality, and use that to help us form both vacuum ideas about when it's good to steal and long-term strategies about what are good stealing frequencies. So already at 2.7, you're already talking about stuff that most intermediate players should have but have never actually learned. So that's what I mean when I say that everyone can learn from the beginning in this book. Chapter 3 is on isolating when someone limps, it's called. In that chapter I'll go through my model for how I think Hero, the reader, should approach these situations, dealing with what I call the ISO triangle, which is a model that basically teaches you how to think about these spots that I've gone over in a previous podcast. See ISOing, the episode of the Carrot Poker podcast about ISOing, Grinder's manual extract about that. If you want more information on the ISO triangle, that also happens to be the section of my book that is up as an example on my website, so do check out 3.1 3.2, 3.3, 3.4. They're all on the website, and those are the ISO triangle and the 3 points of it in detail. I talk a bit about limping behind, how to size ISOs. There's a lot of example hands as well. You just have pages and pages of example hands, basically, in this book. For every chapter, there are loads of examples. Sometimes the examples come first, sometimes they're used to test your knowledge. The examples are always laid out in such a way that the answer comes later. It's also a quiz book. The 152 hands in this book are also challenges for the reader. They're for you to try and work out based on what you've read and put your newfound knowledge to the test. Chapter 4 is on c-betting. I'm going to just sort of skim through this now. I'm not going to spend too much time going into detail. In that chapter, we talk about the factors that make c-bet bluffing. C-betting as a light c-bet, as I call it, good. We talk about c-bet sizing and give loads of examples. A hugely important thing for your game. Good to cover early because it's the most frequent port of call post-flop. Like if you need to know how to steal pre-flop to have a healthy red line and make money at No Limit Hold'em 6 max cash online, you need to know how to c-bet post-flop to do the same thing. Chapter 5 is on value betting, which, you know, enough said, is a very, very crucial area. It's a big, long chapter. It spans about 50 pages. Chapter 6 is on calling opens, something that I feel is never taught in the right way. And I go into huge detail again, provide some default ranges for different pre-flop spots against regs, but also, and talk about why, but also talk about what factors make it good to cold call and open in a vacuum. When should we be doing it and for what reason? There are 3 or 4 reasons. 3 of them are very, very important elementary reasons to call and open. If you don't know these reasons, then you'll get into all kinds of trouble in these situations and start making minus EV calls pre-flop. So then I dive back into post-flop for chapters 7 and 8, and we talk about what I call end of action spots firstly, which is where a hero faces a bet, and if he calls that bet, that will be the last action of the hand. So you face a river bet and you're considering calling or folding, or you face an all-in on an earlier street. There is a very clear-cut thought process that solves these kind of situations that no one ever applies, so you can learn it there in chapter 7. Chapter 8 is all about facing bets in open action spots, so anytime someone bets at you post-flop and you're not closing the action for the hand, so there will be future streets of action to come, or future players behind to act after you make your decision. This chapter is so immense, it was the biggest pain in the ass to edit because it actually spans from page 233 all the way through to page 302, so it's like a 71 or 69 page chapter. It's absolutely enormous, and it covers so many different kinds of situations on the flop and the turn. So definitely a very meaty one that will take a few read-throughs. In chapter 9, we move on and talk about combos and blockers, like the raw math of the game, combinatorics, how they actually can be used pre-flop, post-flop, and how we can use blockers to improve our strategies. Chapter 10 is the enormous chunk about 3-betting. 3-betting is a huge area of poker. It's something I've devoted a lot of my time to as a coach because it's probably the most misplayed area in the entire game, even for intermediate, and even some advanced players play 3-bet spots horribly or think about it in completely the wrong way strategically in the long term. So chapter 10, 10.1 through 10.5 are all about 3-betting and teach the way I think the spot should be considered. Chapter 11 is about facing 3-bets and is equally mammoth and equally taxing. Chapter 12 is on bluffing post-flop on the turn and river. How do we build bluffing ranges? Like, how do we balance our bluffing game? What are the best hands to bluff with? What situations are good to over-bluff inexploitatively or under-bluff inexploitatively, where we want less or more of a bluffing range than would be balanced or none at all? So we're constantly dipping in and out of the vacuum, so to speak, in the Grounder's Manual. Like 1 minute we'll be talking about what makes something good in a vacuum because we've got a fish in the hand and we don't expect good adjustment from a fish to exploit our strategies long term. At other times we'll be talking about balance and what makes a play good in the long term. How does Hero's strategy sustain him and protect him from adjustments from his opponent? How does he create not just a balanced strategy but the optimal balanced strategy given the situation? So we'll be going into a lot of GTO kind of range building and strategy building throughout this book. I don't focus on GTO, I don't even use the word once in the book, and that's intentional because people have all kinds of misconceptions about over-applying GTO principles. And that's what I really want to avoid. So I do cover it. Long-term EV and having the right optimal strategy is very important against better players, but I start off by letting Hero understand what makes things plus EV, minus EV, good and bad in a vacuum before expanding outwards. But we do a lot of that. Don't don't worry about there being a lack of modern GTO theory in this book. There is a shitload of it. There's a lot of it. Then we have 3-bit pots and balance. Chapter 13 is the really meaty kind of GTO chapter where we talk about how to form ranges, how to use combos to create balance strategies down to the T, down to the decimal point of indifference for your opponent. You get to all that, it's a lot more advanced than what comes before. And chapter 14, I vary the stack depth consistently in a chapter for the first time in the manual and talk about how playing deep pre-flop affects things, playing shallow pre-flop affects things, and then the same post-flop for deep and shallow stacks there. Then we have more about the author, a little bit on me, and the Jargon Handbook at the end, and that is 533 or 540 pages, I think it is actually, at the end of the Jargon Handbook. There's a lot in this textbook. It's huge. Let me talk a little bit to summarize this podcast about pricing and why I've gone for the price I have. Don't worry, I've not chosen a price that's completely unaffordable and tried to claim that, well, this knowledge will make you so much money that you should spend $1,000 on this book. That's just bullshit. Anyone that tries to sell a book for $1,000 deserves the piracy that they will get. They deserve to get ripped off. It's just ridiculous. I mean, you're selling a book to a kind of mass market. Well, I am. That's my target audience, is the mass market. Is lots of aspiring players everywhere of various levels. It's a universal book in that sense. And so it doesn't make sense for me to price this at like $1,000. So I've not, and that would be awful. And anyone who says that you should pay $1,000 for their book is taking the piss and is pretty much just trying to become a millionaire really, really quickly, which is a fair enough thing to try to do, but it's not an ethical thing. Like when you create a book that's you've put your heart and soul into, like I have, I've put the last 15 months of my life into the Grinders Manual. I want everyone to read it. I want everyone to feel like they want to buy it without spending loads and loads of money. I don't want them to feel the need to try to pirate my book. I know it's going to happen. It's inevitable these days that piracy occurs, but please, if you follow this podcast and you respect this podcast, I would really appreciate it if you paid for the book instead of tried to find it elsewhere. And, you know, I know that people will redistribute. I'm not saying you can't send this to your friend. I'd rather you didn't, obviously, but you're going to a lot of you. That's fine, you know. But I really appreciate it if people can pay the cost of the book. So I've priced this at £39.99, which equates to around $50. So it's a reasonable price. Well, it's a bit more than $50 actually. I think it's more like closer to 60 now. Depends on how the dollar's fluctuating. It's a reasonable price, I feel, because it's 540 pages. It's enormous. I spent so long on this thing. And I really feel it's a complete course in the game that I'm teaching. It's not a book that scrimps or just teaches certain selective scattered elements all darting about the place. It's not a book that only covers a certain amount of detail or only goes up to a certain level of advancement in poker. It's honestly a complete course, which is why I priced it at $39.99. I think it's probably on the more expensive side for the poker market, but how many poker books are this huge and are this much of a Bible? Honestly, that's my opinion. I think it's well worth the money. I mean, I'd charge someone more than that for an hour of coaching if they bought a single session, happily, with confidence. I wasn't ripping them off. So I think this book is an absolute bargain, and this was lower than I was planning on going, but I feel it's a very fair price. What else? Well, I mean, that's it really. Like, this book, if you're wondering, is this book for you? It certainly is. I mean, that's it. If you're interested in specialising in No Limit Hold'em 6 Max Cash, it's certainly for you. If you're a tournament player, a full ring player, a live player, it is also going to teach you a hell of a lot about the fundamentals of, and I don't mean basic fundamentals, I mean like advanced fundamentals as well, of the game that you're playing. It will really help your understanding. If you're a tournament player, you'll get less out of it than if you're a cash player. There's no denying that. This is an online 6 Max Cash book. If you're a live cash player, you'll get a bit more of it out of it than the tournament player will, but you won't get as much as, I suppose, the optimal target of this book, who is just a guy who's playing, interested in cash games being his main forte, his main game of poker, and online poker being his main vessel with which to play those, through which to play those cash games. So if you want to get in touch with me about the book, if you've got any questions or whatever, or you want to give me feedback on the book, even better, I'd love to hear feedback from those of you who are buying it. I'm already selling it just now. Then please contact me at admin@carrotcorner.com. If you want to go ahead and look at the sample on the website and purchase the book, then the place to go is carrotcorner.com/mybook, or click the My Book tab in Carrot Corner and you can see the extract there with a couple of links to buy. The link to buy the book is through a company called Gumroad, who are very secure. You don't have to worry at all about card details, any kind of lapses in security. They're a big company who handle a lot of sales for different clients. They're based in California. I've researched which company to go with, and I trust that they're going to do a very good job of that, and everything is completely secure. So don't feel strange about clicking any link. I can assure you that there's no problem with that. And yeah, that's really it. It's been a pleasure. It's not the end of the Carrot Poker podcast. Of course, I'll be back with more episodes, but it is the end of the extracts from the book, and it's the end of me going on and on and on about the book every single time that I make this podcast, because it's all that I've been doing recently. I will be talking about it. I will be promoting it through this podcast. If you've already bought it, you may have to endure a little bit of, by the way, guys, buy my book at the end of my podcast, but it shouldn't be too much shameless promotion. Sometimes I get told off for shameless promotion, but in this industry, you kind of have to do as much as you can to get your name out there, because you're competing with a lot of other coaches, and yeah, it's difficult. Publicity is everything. If you piss a few people off, you know, you make money from more people, generally, as long as you don't go overboard. So get in touch with me if you're looking for coaching. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. I'm going on a little holiday. I'll be back in a couple of weeks and taking on students. So if you read the book and you think, hey, I like the way this guy teaches or writes, and you want to consider private coaching, get in touch. I should still have some availability for the next couple of months, although I am expecting things to get a lot busier when this book comes out. At least I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they will, because obviously part of the book is for publicity as well as it is for teaching you. It's for publicity for my coaching as well. And yeah, that's it really. Hope that you enjoyed the podcast and the extracts, and stay tuned for lots more student interviews and all kinds of other stuff. The usual Carrot Corner kind of material coming back to you on a weekly, regular basis over the next few weeks, and onwards forever after that, or for as long as the Carrot Poker podcast lasts, or online poker is not banned in the world because, I don't know, Donald Trump gets into power and outlaws it or something. Anyway, this has been Characters for Carrot Poker, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks for listening.